I like to look at the maze as kind of this symbol of, well, there's kind of this downward spiral element, right? And this kind of windingness of the edge of sanity, and kind of this escape in regards for the mother and the child to escape the maze, whereas Jack does not escape the maze, literally. So it's both this actual event that occurs in the film, but then this kind of symbol for trying to navigate the maze of your own inner mess. Can you unwind all the strange neuroses and the ways you deceive yourself? Can you navigate that to come out on the other end of sanity? And there's a very interesting thing here, I think. If you've ever done psychedelic drugs, there is I can't remember what it's called, but there's this way your thinking changes. I think it's described in some way, I can't remember, but there's different ways of thinking. And one of the weird things that happens for individuals who choose to legally consume psychedelic substances is that your thinking gets really weird. It's no longer the kind of linear, normal thinking that we tend to, think of as thinking, which is I think of this concept and I come out of these little branches as I think about it, right? Like think of, like those mind maps that people draw when they're coming up with ideas. You'll have the big idea and then these little offshoots. That's kind of the rational, linear mode of thinking. But there's also chaos thinking, which tends to come with any drug use, really. But psychedelics is a more pleasant way to describe that because it's not entirely detrimental, where your thinking changes so much. And that's kind of why, in some regards, people like these things for creativity. Because instead of that kind of A to B thinking, you can go from D to B and from C to F. And it's just like the thinking changes. The way that you think about subjects, the way you draw connections changes. And so, I don't know, I see this idea of the maze as something that can be a symbol for understanding how we understand ourselves and how we think things through. Do you have this kind of obscure, chaotic thinking pattern? Do you have a very I walk from point A to point B pattern? Or can you navigate these the labyrinth of thoughts when you start to really get into weird thinking and trying to think about things deeply in new ways? Then you can't do linear thinking, right? Because that's the most common way to think about things. You would have to think about things in a very different way. And I think once you start messing with ideas, right, it's kind of like when we talk about Jung and his ideas, you think a little bit differently. You engage with ideas a little bit differently. Not to say it's not rational or it's crazy, but it's this idea of the labyrinth, which goes back to the way that you defined it as kind of confusing. What was it? Thinking pattern? I think you said it was exactly that.
So I'm reading Symbols of Transformation, I think is what it's called, by Carl Jung. And the very beginning of the book, he talks about the first or second chapter is called Two Ways of Thinking. And the first is, and this will tie into the Logos, which maybe we'll start to touch in to now. The first is directed, rational, step-by-step, logical thinking. And then he contrasts this with the second type of thinking, which he associates with the imagination of children, with the mindset of the ancients, who still saw the world as infused with spirit and what we would call supernatural things, and with dreaming. So those three types of things he puts over as the second type of thinking, as opposed to the logical and the rational.